Your self-talk shapes your reality more than you realize because every thought, every word you allow to repeat in your mind is creating a blueprint that your life unconsciously follows. The voice inside your head has more influence than the opinions of your friends, the judgments of your critics, or even the circumstances you face, because it is constant, it never stops speaking, and it becomes the lens through which you see the world. When you consistently tell yourself that you are capable, that you are strong, that you can endure and rise above challenges, your brain begins to form patterns of belief that align with those words. But when you allow negative words to take root, when you repeat doubts, fears, and insecurities, your life starts to mirror those limitations. The truth is that your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts, and those thoughts are heavily influenced by what you are saying to yourself on a daily basis. Think about it. Every single action you've ever taken began with a thought. That thought was shaped by what you believed, and your belief was built on the words you've been feeding yourself. If you constantly tell yourself that you are not good enough, then you will hesitate when opportunities arise, you will sabotage your own progress, and you will shrink when you should step forward. But if you tell yourself that you are worthy, that you are prepared, that you have what it takes, you will move with confidence, you will take risks, and you will see doors open that once looked impossible. Self-talk is not just harmless chatter. It is the foundation upon which your entire mindset is built. Science confirms this reality. Neurologists explain that the brain cannot easily distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is actually happening. That means when you repeat certain words to yourself, your mind begins to accept them as truth, creating neural pathways that reinforce the message. If you say, "I'm a failure," often enough, your brain builds the habit of expecting failure, and your behavior will naturally follow. On the other hand, if you repeatedly affirm, "I succeed because I don't quit," your mind programs itself to persist, to keep pushing forward, even in difficulty. The words you speak to yourself are literally carving grooves in your brain, shaping your automatic responses, influencing your emotions, and guiding your behavior. Even in everyday life, you can see how this works. A student who constantly tells themselves, "I'm terrible at math," will unconsciously prove that statement true by approaching problems with fear and avoiding effort. But another student who says, "I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm getting better every day," will gradually build confidence, take more risks in practice, and eventually outperform their own expectations. The same principle applies in careers, relationships, health, and personal growth. Your self-talk is programming your reality, whether you realize it or not. This is why so many successful people emphasize the importance of affirmations, visualization, and intentional thought patterns. They understand that their external results are simply a reflection of their internal conversation. They train themselves to speak words of possibility, to silence the inner critic, and to amplify the inner coach. Instead of allowing fear to dominate, they cultivate courage through repetition of powerful self-talk. They replace "I can't" with "I will," and over time, their lives shift in extraordinary ways. Your self-talk is not background noise. It is the steering wheel of your destiny, constantly guiding you either toward your potential or away from it. Most people speak negatively without realizing it because the human mind has been conditioned over time to focus on problems, fears, and threats more than possibilities, strengths, and opportunities. The inner dialogue that runs through your head is often so automatic that you do not even notice the harsh tone or destructive language you use toward yourself. You wake up in the morning and immediately think about how tired you are, how much you dislike your job, how far behind you feel, and without even recognizing it, you have already poisoned the energy of your day with words that weaken you. The voice inside says things like, "I always mess things up. I'll never be good enough. What's the point of trying?" And even if you don't say them out loud, they sink into your subconscious, where they quietly shape your beliefs and behaviors. This pattern of negative self-talk is so common because most people learned it early in life, from environments where criticism was louder than encouragement, where mistakes were highlighted more than progress, and where comparison created constant feelings of inadequacy. What makes negative self-talk even more damaging is that it often disguises itself as truth. When you fail at something, your mind repeats, "I'm a failure," as if it is a fact rather than an opinion. When someone rejects you, your inner voice whispers, "I'm not lovable," as if rejection defines your worth. When you struggle to reach a goal, you tell yourself, "I can't do this," instead of, "I haven't figured it out yet." These words feel natural because they align with fear and doubt, emotions that the brain clings to as a form of protection. The mind assumes that by being critical, by preparing for the worst, it is keeping you safe, but in reality, it is only keeping you stuck. Every time you say something negative about yourself, you are reinforcing a false limitation that becomes harder to break with repetition. Consider how many times in a single day a person might cut themselves down without noticing. You spill coffee and immediately say, "I'm so stupid." You forget a small detail at work and think, "I can't do anything right." You look in the mirror and focus on flaws, telling yourself, "I look terrible." These statements may seem harmless in the moment, but words accumulate, and over weeks, months, and years they create a mindset that sees only weakness, only mistakes, only lack. This is why people feel trapped in cycles of low confidence, procrastination, and fear of failure. It is not that they are incapable, it is that they have been convincing themselves they are incapable through constant negative repetition. The tragedy of this habit is that most people don't even challenge these words. They accept them as part of who they are instead of recognizing them as a destructive script that can be rewritten. If you spoke to a friend the way you speak to yourself, you would lose that friendship immediately because no one wants to be around a voice that constantly criticizes and diminishes. Yet people tolerate that kind of treatment from their own inner dialogue every single day. The mind becomes so used to negativity that it feels strange or uncomfortable to say something kind or encouraging to yourself. That discomfort is the clearest sign of how deeply negativity has been ingrained. When you finally notice the pattern, you begin to realize how much power you have given away to an inner critic that was never supposed to run your life. The first step is awareness, catching those small but constant negative statements and refusing to accept them as truth. Just as repetition built the habit of destructive self-talk, repetition can build a new habit of empowering self-talk. Most people speak negatively without realizing it. But the moment you become aware, you can choose a different voice, a voice that lifts instead of tears down, a voice that builds courage instead of fear, a voice that becomes your greatest ally instead of your greatest enemy. The brain believes repetition because it is wired to conserve energy by turning repeated thoughts into automatic patterns. Every time you think a thought, you fire a set of neurons, and when you think that same thought again, those neurons fire more easily, creating a stronger connection. Over time, the brain does not question whether the thought is true or false. It simply accepts it as reality because it has heard it so often. This is why habits form, why beliefs solidify, and why the words you constantly say to yourself become the script your life unconsciously follows. If you constantly repeat to yourself that you are unlucky, unworthy, or incapable, the brain records that message as fact, and then it influences your emotions and behaviors to align with that belief. On the other hand, if you repeatedly tell yourself that you are resilient, capable, and growing stronger, your brain accepts that reality and begins to create the mindset and actions that bring it to life. Think about how advertising works. Companies know that if you hear the same slogan or see the same message over and over, you begin to believe it and trust it even without proof. The same mechanism is happening inside your head every single day with the thoughts you repeat. If your mind keeps replaying, "I always fail," eventually you stop questioning it and begin to act in ways that make failure more likely. But if you rehearse, "I always find a way," your brain accepts it and begins to look for solutions even in difficult situations. Repetition is the language of the subconscious mind, and the subconscious is what truly governs most of your choices, reactions, and confidence levels. This is why affirmations and intentional self-talk are so powerful. When you deliberately repeat empowering words, you are not just saying nice things, you are reprogramming your brain through consistent reinforcement. At first, it may feel unnatural or forced, but that is only because your mind is used to hearing the opposite message. Just as a muscle grows with consistent exercise, the brain's acceptance of new beliefs grows with consistent repetition. The more often you repeat a thought, the more normal it feels, and eventually it becomes automatic. Once it becomes automatic, your brain no longer questions it, and your life begins to reflect it. Consider how this plays out in everyday situations. Someone who constantly repeats to themselves that they are shy will eventually avoid conversations, miss opportunities to connect, and reinforce that identity until it feels unchangeable. But someone who repeats that they are confident and approachable, even if they don't fully feel it at first, will begin to carry themselves differently, smile more, engage more, and gradually grow into that identity. The difference is not in natural ability, but in what the brain has been trained to believe through repetition. The brain is neutral. It does not care what message it accepts. It only cares about what message is repeated the most. This also explains why breaking old patterns can be so challenging. If you have been telling yourself the same limiting story for years, that pathway in your brain is strong, and trying to create a new one will feel uncomfortable. But just like carving a new trail through a forest, the more often you walk it, the clearer and easier it becomes. Over time, the old path grows over from lack of use, and the new path becomes your default route. The same is true for thoughts. The repeated thought becomes the easy path, the automatic response, the identity you wear without questioning. That is why it is so important to be intentional with what you allow yourself to say and think. The brain believes repetition because repetition is survival. The mind assumes that if a thought keeps showing up, it must be important and worth believing. Your responsibility is to take control of that repetition, to feed your mind with words and ideas that empower rather than weaken, to repeat the kind of truth that lifts you rather than the lies that limit you. Once you understand this principle, you begin to see that every word you rehearse is a seed being planted in your subconscious, and every seed repeated enough will eventually take root and bear fruit in your reality. 3 days can spark a mental reset because the mind responds quickly to intentional focus, and even a short period of consistent change in self-talk can interrupt old patterns and begin forming new ones. When you spend 3 days speaking to yourself with power instead of doubt, you are giving your brain a new script to follow, and that script starts to override the old one. The first day is about awareness, catching the negative words that normally slip out unnoticed, and replacing them with something stronger. The second day is about reinforcement, repeating those empowering statements often enough that they start to feel less foreign and more natural. By the third day, you begin to feel a subtle shift inside, a difference in the way you carry yourself, the way you respond to challenges, and the way you perceive opportunities. 3 days may sound short, but it is long enough for your brain to notice a pattern and start adjusting its default responses. Think of it like jump, starting a battery. If your mind has been drained by years of negative repetition, all it takes is a short, consistent surge of positive energy to begin recharging. The process is not about instant perfection, but about showing your brain a new way of thinking and proving to yourself that change is possible. For 3 days, if you flood your inner dialogue with affirmations like, I am capable, I am worthy, I am stronger than my challenges, you begin to hear your own voice differently. You stop being the enemy inside your head and start becoming your greatest ally. The mind, which once worked against you with constant criticism, begins to work for you with encouragement and belief. The reason 3 days can be so powerful is that most people never go that long without tearing themselves down. Negative self-talk has become so normal that it often goes unchallenged for weeks, months, or even years. But when you take 3 days to intentionally break that cycle, you interrupt the momentum of negativity and replace it with momentum in a new direction. Habits are built on repetition, and while 3 days is not enough to fully cement a new habit, it is enough to plant the seed and show results that motivate you to continue. You begin to realize that your energy feels different, your mood is lighter, and your outlook is clearer simply because of the words you've been choosing. Another reason 3 days can create a reset is the power of emotional contrast. On the first day, when you catch yourself about to say, I can't, and instead declare, I will, you feel the difference immediately. It may feel awkward, but it also feels empowering. That emotional jolt shows you the gap between the old way of thinking and the new way. By the second day, that empowerment grows because you are reinforcing it through repetition. By the third day, you begin to crave that feeling because your brain is recognizing it as beneficial. This emotional reinforcement helps your brain adopt the new pattern more quickly. During those 3 days, you also start to notice how many situations in life are affected by your self-talk. You see how speaking to yourself differently changes the way you respond to stress, the way you approach challenges, and even the way you interact with others. Instead of walking into a room thinking, I don't belong here, you begin to say, I have value to bring. Instead of looking at a problem and thinking, this is impossible, you say, there is a way, and I will find it. 3 days of practicing this creates a ripple effect in your behavior. that makes you realize just how much power you've always had, but were not using. 3 days can feel like a small commitment, but it has the potential to spark a transformation because it gives you proof that change is real. It shows you that your mind is not fixed, your patterns are not permanent, and your self-talk can be reshaped in a short time. Once you see that shift in yourself after 3 days, you gain the motivation to extend it into 7 days, into 2 weeks, into a lifestyle. The reset begins with a short burst of focus, and that focus opens the door to a new way of living that starts with the words you choose to say to yourself. Positive declarations create momentum because every word of encouragement you speak to yourself adds energy to your actions and builds confidence in your mind. Momentum is the force that keeps you moving forward even when obstacles arise, and it begins with the thoughts and words that you repeat to yourself each day. When you declare, "I am capable," you are not just describing a state of being, you are creating the mindset that drives you to take steps in alignment with that belief. Each declaration is like pushing a heavy wheel. At first it feels hard to move, but every push makes the next one easier, and soon the wheel turns on its own with less effort. That is the power of momentum created by consistent positive self-talk. At the beginning, saying affirmations may feel forced, awkward, or even fake, because your mind is used to the old script of negativity. But each time you repeat a positive declaration, you weaken the old voice and strengthen the new one. The more you declare strength, confidence, and resilience, the more your brain accepts those qualities as your identity. Momentum builds because your actions begin to match your words and your results begin to reflect your actions. You move in the direction of the story you are telling yourself, and when that story is empowering, you keep building a cycle of belief and achievement. Consider someone who starts their day by saying, "I am focused, I am disciplined, I am ready to succeed." That person walks into their day with a different posture, a different energy, and a different approach to challenges compared to someone who wakes up saying, "This is going to be another terrible day." The first set of declarations creates forward motion because it primes the mind to look for opportunities and solutions. The second set creates drag, holding the person back before the day even begins. Momentum is not about sudden big leaps. It is about the compounding effect of small, repeated pushes in the right direction, and positive declarations provide those pushes consistently. Momentum also comes from emotional reinforcement. When you declare something positive and then act on it, you feel a surge of confidence that encourages you to repeat the process again. For example, if you say, "I am disciplined," and then follow through on a task you were tempted to avoid, you feel proud of yourself, and that pride motivates you to make another declaration and take another step. This cycle repeats and grows, creating a powerful sense of momentum that carries you forward even on days when motivation is low. Words plant the seed, action waters it, and emotion gives it sunlight, and together they produce growth that compounds over time. Another aspect of momentum is the way it influences other areas of life. Positive declarations in one area often spill over into others. When you tell yourself, "I am strong enough to face challenges," you may start by applying it to your work, but soon you notice it affecting the way you handle personal struggles or health goals. Confidence in one area fuels confidence in another, and that interconnected growth builds momentum across your entire life. The words you speak are like sparks, and once they ignite in one area, They can spread into every part of your being. Momentum is powerful because it reduces resistance. At the start of change, resistance is strong because your old patterns fight to survive. But with every declaration and every aligned action, resistance weakens and progress feels smoother. What once required great effort becomes natural, and what once felt impossible becomes expected. That is the essence of momentum created by positive declarations. You no longer have to fight with yourself to move forward. The words you have been repeating push you automatically, carrying you with energy you did not know you had. Positive declarations create momentum because they are more than words. They are commands to your subconscious, instructions to your emotions, and triggers for your behavior. They set things in motion, they keep things in motion, and they build a cycle where belief fuels action, action fuels confidence, and confidence fuels more belief. Once momentum is built, it carries you further than motivation alone ever could, and it all begins with the decision to speak power into your own life every single day. Your inner voice becomes your coach or your enemy, depending on how you train it, and the quality of that inner dialogue can determine the entire direction of your life. Inside every person, there is a constant conversation, a stream of words and judgments that never truly stops. Some people hear encouragement, guidance, and reminders of strength when challenges appear, while others hear criticism, doubt, and reminders of failure. The difference is not in talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but in how that inner voice has been shaped over time. If you have trained it to support you, it becomes a powerful coach that pushes you to rise higher. But if you have allowed it to run unchecked with negativity, it becomes an enemy that quietly sabotages you from within. When your inner voice acts as a coach, it reminds you of your strengths when you forget them. It says things like, "You've handled worse before, you can handle this now," or "Keep going, one step at a time." It becomes a source of resilience, pushing you forward when motivation fades. That kind of inner dialogue does not ignore difficulties, but reframes them, reminding you that growth comes from struggle and that setbacks are not the end, but part of the process. A coaching voice does not let you off the hook when you want to quit, but it also does not tear you down when you stumble. It speaks with firmness and compassion, holding you accountable while also encouraging you to keep moving forward. This type of inner voice is built by choosing words of belief, practicing affirmations, and consistently replacing destructive thoughts with empowering ones. When your inner voice acts as an enemy, it attacks you at your weakest points. It whispers, "You're not good enough. You always fail. There's no point in trying." And those words drain your confidence before you even take action. This enemy voice magnifies mistakes, turning small setbacks into proof of failure. It convinces you to give up on opportunities because it says you're not ready or not worthy. It criticizes you in ways harsher than any external person ever could. And because it comes from within, it feels personal, believable, and inescapable. This inner enemy does not need outside evidence. It builds its case out of fear, insecurity, and repetition. And if left unchecked, it can keep you trapped for years in cycles of self-sabotage. The power of the inner voice lies in the fact that it speaks more often than anyone else. External voices come and go. Friends, family, teachers, critics. But your inner voice speaks to you every waking hour. That makes it either the most valuable coach you could ever have or the most dangerous enemy you will ever face. What you hear most often is what you begin to believe. and what you believe shapes how you act. If your coach is loud and your enemy is silent, you walk with confidence, pursue goals, and recover quickly from failures. If your enemy is loud and your coach is silent, you hesitate, you doubt, and you miss chances that could have changed your life. The choice of which one dominates is made through training. Just as an athlete trains their body to respond automatically under pressure, you can train your inner voice to respond with strength instead of fear. Every time you challenge a negative thought and replace it with a positive declaration, you are strengthening your coach and weakening your enemy. Every time you choose to encourage yourself instead of criticize yourself, you are shifting the balance of power. Over time, the voice that once sabotaged you grows quieter, and the voice that pushes you forward grows stronger. The enemy does not disappear completely, but it loses influence, and the coach becomes the dominant guide. Your inner voice becomes your coach or your enemy, depending on what you feed it daily. Feed it with negativity, and it will tear you down. Feed it with belief, and it will lift you up. It is always speaking, always guiding, and always shaping who you become. The difference between a life of hesitation and a life of confidence is not how loud the world speaks to you, but how powerful your own inner voice becomes in response.